Thank you. Orstein,
Yes.
Kathleen,
Here.
Kelly,
Yes.
Ray,
Yes, and just so you know, your voice is really muffled. So
I actually agree with that.
okay, thank you. Is this better?
No.
you're told. Oh.
I will fix it during closed session. So
Here.
thank you.
Thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, the Republic for which it
Stands one nation.
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice
for all.
Thank you. Now I'd like to adjourn to closed session. See you all at the other link. There's nothing to report from our closed session, and move us on to agenda item number 6, informational presentation 2, Larkspur Landing Circle land use entitlements and Larkspur General Plan 2040. So I think I'm turning it over to Riley Hurd. Is that correct? Or Steve? Steve, I'll turn it over to Steve. We'll turn it over to Riley. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Steve Moore, General Manager, for those of you who are joining us from the public. And thanks to the board for having this special meeting. This is on the agenda noticed as Informational Presentation 2, Larkspur Landing Circle Land Use Entitlements and General Plan 2040 for the City of Larkspur. And this is the second informational meeting about the Larkspur Landing property. The first one focused on options that the board has with respect to transactional structures in the disposition of this property, the former wastewater treatment plant site that was recently cleaned up to unrestricted land use standards. That was the first informational presentation. This is the second one where we're going to dive deeper into the issue of land use entitlements, what they mean, what the existing entitlements are on this property, and how the general plan update in the City of Larkspur could affect the issue of land use entitlements. And then we'll have future informational presentations to explore other dimensions of this property and how to dispose of it as surplus property in a way that meets the board's goals. And so, for instance, we may dive deeper next time into the issue of the Surplus Lands Act, but we won't talk about that today. So with that, just reminding folks, the board will make no decisions today. This is for informational purposes only. And with that, I'd like to introduce and hand over the floor to Riley Hurd from Ragiantis Freitas. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, and good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Riley Hurd. I'm a land use attorney here at Ragiantis Freitas in San Rafael. I focus on Marin County. If you'll recall, at one of your previous meetings, I was authorized by the board to be engaged for a pretty limited task, which was an analysis of the existing entitlements, if any, for your Larkspur Landing property. I've completed my review. I've provided you with a memorandum. It had a number of exhibits. It's quite dense. These land use things almost always are. So we thought it might be helpful to give a verbal presentation. I'll be sharing my screen in a little bit here. And I'll, of course, be welcoming any questions that you may have. Taken a pretty deep dive into the history here to figure out where things are. And before I share my screen, because when you do that, you just become a little guy in the corner. And I don't like to bury the lead or the conclusion in these presentations. I figured I would start with that. And the conclusion is at the district's property, there is a nearly fully entitled project. Other than renewing the tentative parcel map that would need to occur and then doing the final subdivision mapping. The rest of the project is approved, and it's approved as we sit here today. Now the caveat to that is it's a very specific project. So if that were something that the district or a development partner wanted to pursue, it's there, and reinstituting it would be relatively straightforward, with a couple caveats that I will discuss during the presentation. So again, high level takeaway, most of the entitlements remain in place, and those entitlements are for a very specific thing in a very specific location, specific uses, specific densities, but they are there. So now what I'll do is share my screen, and I'll show you how I reached that conclusion, some of the information that supports it, and I will also go over what I found to be probably the most interesting part of the research, which is the status of the Larkspur General Plan update, which is very, very specific to this property. It's somewhat unusual to have a general plan that's very specific to a property. So that is what I will do here. 1 second, please. Okay, get this into full screen. All right, so hopefully you can now see my screen. If I could just get a thumbs up from someone that is working. Excellent. Okay, let's jump right in here. So just a reminder, this is a graphic you've seen before, just an orientation of where the property is. I know most folks are familiar, very familiar with this, since you're mostly long-term board members, but we have members of the public here. So 2000 Larkspur Landing Circle, next to Marin Country Mart. I still mistakenly call it Larkspur Landing. And then you've got a lot of transit options nearby, the SMART train, the ferry, Sir Francis Drake, Highway 101. You got some apartment housing, apartment homes. Drake's Cove is to the right in this graphic, and this is just an orientation. Before going into the entitlements, it's important to understand how Larkspur's land use permitting works. And there is a hierarchy. And at the top of that is the Constitution of Development. It's the general plan. This is the place where goals and programs are set to be implemented by the city. And they typically use their zoning code to implement what happens in a general plan, the Constitution. Now, Larkspur is a little bit unique in that underneath the general plan in the hierarchy is something called a preliminary development plan. Some places call this a master plan. This is a broad vision for a property, and it can entail multiple uses. It can have different regulations that apply to different parts of a property, and it's preliminary. It is a broad scope look at a property. Once you set your preliminary development plan, you then move to the precise development plan phase, which often also includes the design review phase. This is where you've focused down on the different parts of the property and the different uses. You map them out, you design them, and you get the precise plan for each of those uses approved by the city. And to do that, you have to have first had a preliminary development plan. And of course, that preliminary plan must comport with the general plan at the top of the food chain. So just keeping this hierarchy in mind as we go through the entitlements, I think really helps understand how the project that's currently approved at the property came to be. It would also be the roadmap for any alternate project that the district ever sought for the property, or a development partner of the district ever sought for the property. So I thought it would be helpful to show the outline of the two separate assessors parcels that exist at the site. The reason this is helpful is as you go through the different entitlements and plans, these shapes appear multiple times. And so it's good to have this vision of the two assessors parcels. As the table indicates, there's one large one, that's about the 9-acre parcel. That's the one where the general plan currently calls for residential, commercial, and some open space. And the zoning of it is PD. That's why you end up having to do the precise plan. The second parcel, much smaller in size, is the one at the top, 1.5 acres. That general plan land use designation is public facilities. And we'll get into why, but just as a reminder, that was going to be the sanitary district, headquarters, administration building, etc. So the general plan on that one, public facilities, zoning, also PD. That's to give you a little vision of the site as we move through the approved plan. So here we are at the top of the food chain. This is the current general plan designation for the site. There's an open space parcel. That's what borders along the Drake's Cove. There's the public facilities sector, which you saw as that parcel 2. And then you have a residential high density sector, and you have a commercial sector. This was done via resolution in 2005 by the city of Larkspur. It's a little bit unique based on my experience to see general plan designations for a single site be split up in the mapping. And we would typically call this split zoning. In this case, it's not the zoning, it's the general plan, but the concept is the same. One site with multiple discrete and distinct designations. The reason that is typically not done, just to be frank, is because it's very restrictive. It's very limiting. It doesn't provide flexibility for the entirety of the property. And you better be sure that your project fits within the lines of the GP designations, or you find yourself having to do a general plan amendment if you want to change things. That being said, this is where we sit today. These are the designations in the general plan for this property. And we'll get into later what the city's thinking about doing in regards to these, but this is how it sits today. So after this general plan update for the site came the preliminary development plan. So now we're down to step number 2 on the hierarchy. And this was kind of a holistic plan for the property that approved 126 multifamily residential dwelling units. That was in 9 different structures. It had an affordability component. It approved a hotel that was on the commercial portion of the site. And then it approved an administration and maintenance facility for the sanitary district on the upper smaller parcel. So this was the preliminary plan for the site that would then give someone the ability to come through and do precise plans for each component. And that's exactly what happened for 2 out of the 3 of these. So after this gets approved, next came the following. Actually, I want to hit on one thing before showing you the precise plans, because it's actually really important. When the preliminary plan was approved, that same ordinance also adopted an environmental review document pursuant to CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. The level of review was a mitigated negative declaration. CEQA review does not expire, okay? So that's an important fact. However, there is a major caveat to the no expiration rule, and that is if you wait too long to implement your project and there are changes in the law, changes in data about what's going on in the neighborhood, you can have to revisit your environmental document and update it to reflect those changes, whether it be new traffic patterns, different densities, new science, new, there are many categories of the CEQA review. So CEQA was completed, it's in effect. It would depend on what the next phase of any project looked like, about what, if anything, you would need to redo in the environmental document. But there's no technical expiration date. So I thought that was really important to point out for you guys, that when the preliminary plan was approved, so was the environmental review, but it might need to be updated. The preliminary plan came with a number of conditions. I wanted to throw them out there because some of them could be quite costly. Apparently there's something called Tub Lake. I was born and raised in Marin County. That was the first time I ever heard of it. I did look it up and see what it was. There's a question about the Tub Lake Dam. There was the open space dedication. There are park fees, a pedestrian path. There's a Drake's Cove connector road requirement to get people out of Drake's Cove over towards the Marin Country Mart and vice versa. There were tree requirements. There's environmental remediation. Again, all of these were contained in the approved preliminary plan as conditions of approval. So if someone were to execute that plan, these conditions are still in place today.
Riley?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you because you're doing a great job, but that was one of my first questions, and I Googled it, and I couldn't find anything on Tubbs Lake except 2 references to Ross Valley Sanitary in this property. So can you please tell me where is it? What is it? I've never heard.
Yeah, you and me both. My Google landed me on Tub Lake being something to do with the water storage for the adjacent brickyard, which is now, or at some point was, the fondue restaurant. And that's the most information I could glean. The condition of approval regarding the Tub Lake Dam is very nebulous. It says you need to put in on maintaining or upgrading the dam if the city attorney finds that there's a nexus between this project and the dam.
Page 116 of 168, it's in Exhibit C. Other than that, I'll be quiet.
Okay, yeah, to me, reading that one, just a little bit unusual. The nexus is supposed to be determined prior to the imposition of the condition traditionally, and not put off for down the road, but it's there, so I put it in the memo, and that's what I was able to find out about Tub Lake. That would obviously require more investigation, because to me, when I see dam maintenance or improvements, I see dollar signs. So those are some of the conditions that went with the preliminary plan. Okay, so now we are into the third phase in the hierarchy. This is when the precise plans started getting pulled and approved for the property. So what came first was Ordinance 951. This was the residential precise plan. This allowed for the 126 multifamily units. This was the accessory buildings, community clubhouse, and this image that's on the screen comes from the ordinance that approved the precise plan. I'd also like to note that it also approved the design review for the project. There's a full package, elevations, so on and so forth. But it, again, just with the vision of the site in mind, gives you an idea of where the residential component was going to be located. Remember, the site is here. This will be the open space buffer. This is the sanitary area. This is the hotel we're about to talk about. But the precise plan got approved and the design review got approved. So made it all the way down to the third level on the hierarchy for the residential component. Moving along, the hotel component. This precise plan is also approved and still in effect. This is a 100-room, 4-story, about 64,000 square foot hotel. I'll put a red circle around it so you could see the location of it in relation to where the residential was approved. Again, the design review was also approved for this, full submittal package, elevations, etc. So the residential and the hotel components each had the precise plans approved for the property. Wanted to talk very briefly about expirations because the first thing I thought about and wanted to look at in the municipal code was the potential that some of these entitlements had expired. I've encountered many city and town codes that have specific provisions about when these expire. So first and foremost, general plan amendments do not expire. They are legislative. They can be changed at any time by a city council, but the general plan designation is what it is. Preliminary plans can expire, and in Larkspur, if no precise plan is pulled within 2 years, then your preliminary plan can expire. That didn't happen, as I just said. Your precise plans were approved here, so the preliminary plan remains in place. Then we get to the precise plans. They can expire. Can expire in 3 years if construction does not commence, but that is not automatic. What it takes is a unilateral calling up by the City Planning Commission of the precise plan to seek to reclassify the property. If that doesn't occur, the precise plan stays in place and stays approved, and it has not occurred here. So you've got the general plan, you got the preliminary plan, and you got your precise plans all still valid for the property for this specific project only. Now, as long as the precise plan stays in place, your design review also stays in place, and other permits, associated permits. That could be tree removal. The circulation permit was approved as part of the precise plan. That came with a big fee. Those, the code in Larkspur says those stay so long as the precise plan's in place. Now, the one exception to the everything stays in place rule is the Subdivision Map Act process. So I wanted to cover that very quickly. There was a tentative parcel map that was approved. It was to split what I call the mixed use parcel, the large parcel, into 4 separate lots. It was also extended at one point. And the plan is you start with a tentative parcel map, and then later on you do a final parcel map. In this case, it was going to be a phased approach where the final parcel maps would be recorded in phases. That did not occur. And after the extension, the tentative parcel map has expired. So that is the singular previously approved component of this specific project that has expired and would need to be redone with certainty. I have a strong feeling components of the CEQA environmental review would also need to be updated, but that's a question of fact for another time. So here it is. This is the approved, as we sit here today, project. It's a district office administrative facility for the sanitary district. It's a 100-room hotel, and it's 126 residential units. There's also the open space band, of course. There's all the conditions. And I think what's really important for the board to understand is the specificity of these approvals. If someone wants to do a similar project, but let's say they wanted to move the residential up the hill to capture views and move the hotel along Sir Francis Drake, or didn't want to do a sanitary district facility, or for that matter, didn't want to do a public facility project at all, then everything I just went through is moot. You would be starting from scratch, and you would need a new general plan designation. If you didn't want to follow that layout I showed you, you would need a new preliminary plan. You would need new precise plans for each component, and you would need to map it pursuant to the Subdivision Map Act. So the reason I wanted to repeat that is it's kind of a big caveat. Yes, you have entitlements, but it's only for a very, very, very specific project. I was going to keep going at this point, but I think I would like to pause briefly to ask if there are questions about this phase before I jump into the general plan update and the implications that that has for your property. If there's anyone has any questions about the historical in-place entitlements, I think it would be good to ask them now.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, board members, any questions? Pam?
Hi, Riley. Okay, so so they're working on a general plan now, right? I've been hearing this for about almost 8 years that they're going to update the general plan. And then I know there's a advisory committee that's been working on it. So I would like to let the public know and our board know that there is an advisory committee, is from what I know. Is that correct, Riley?
Yes, absolutely. And,
Right.
and during my general plan presentation, I have a little bit on the timing that I got from the city and other things like that.
Yeah, we have the opportunity to look at those minutes or whatever, even go to those meetings. I just wanted to throw that out there because there's a lot to catch up on history here. So I have a quick question about when you say precise plan approved by Larkspur, but you didn't say it's approved by Larkspur, but the district, the sanitary district, really did not have a say in that, correct?
That's outside the scope of my research. I just for the entitlements that run with the land, and these entitlements do run with the land.
But I want the public to understand that we, the board, the district, did not make a decision on how this precise plan is rolling. It's all done through the town of Larkspur.
Oh, who is the lead agency for approvals? That's the city of Larkspur.
Right, okay. I just want to get clear on that because you kept saying them, and I want them to know that that is Larkspur, not, okay, thank you. Okay, and then when you go into your general plan next segment, I think it might be helpful to explain to the public what is a general plan in hopefully 1 or 2 minutes, because a lot of people do not understand what a general plan does and how it governs. And then when you talk about precise plan, you're actually talking about, it sounds like a zone within a zone, correct?
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it, and that's how I describe it to people. The way to think about a precise plan or a PD district is what it really is site-specific zoning. And it says, for this property, these are the rules. The rules are what we have in this precise plan. It's true, there's a zoning ordinance that zoned it PD, but when you read the section of the zoning ordinance that allows for PD zoning, it's basically saying you will craft site-specific regulations through a precise plan, and those are the rules for the property.
Okay, and then last, you don't have to answer this now, but you have said in here a few times about affordable housing. You need to delineate, what does that mean? Is that low affordable? Is that high affordable? So that was sort of left kind of open-ended. Thank you, that's all.
Yeah, no problem.
Board members, anybody else have any questions about this first part of the presentation? Any members of the public have, oh, sorry, Doug, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to get back to, I understand exactly what you're talking about with the detailed plan and the approvals thereon. We're not going to be doing Ross Valley Sanitary headquarters there. We bought one. So does that toss it out all out? I mean, I'm not suggesting we do, but I'm saying in theory, can we fake one? I'm just, because we're not going to have a Ross Valley Sanitary District property there. And I'm glad you went through that all because it was critical to do so, but it's all out. correct? Is that correct, or is there something I'm not?
Yeah, great question. I'm obviously aware that the district has since purchased a headquarters elsewhere in Marin County and would no longer need to have a sanitary district administration building on this property. So interestingly, the precise plans that were approved were for the hotel component and for the residential component. Precise plan was never pulled for the sanitary district headquarters component. So that doesn't even exist, but the site, that portion, the small parcel on the top of the screen, if you will, is designated as public facilities in the general plan and is designated as the sanitary district headquarters in the preliminary plan. So if you wanted to do something else with just that property, you would need to amend the preliminary plan and the general plan to give it a new designation that would comport with whatever your desired use for that portion of the site might be.
But it doesn't necessarily preclude the rest of the plan, a detailed plan, from remaining in effect. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I'll give you an anecdote just as an example. I did a significantly sized residential development that had a central component of commercial as part of a master plan. And as the years went on, the commercial didn't get built, the retail environment started changing, and we made an amendment to change the commercial component to also be residential. We didn't have to go back and redo all of the other surrounding residential, but we had to address that specific site. So you'd be doing something like that.
Thank you.
Right.
Yes, go ahead, Steve.
Thank you. I was curious, Riley, about, these all being ordinances. Is that typical for towns and the county to adopt ordinances to determine master plans and precise development plans?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it kind of dovetails with the previous question. And the answer is yes. And the reason is it's the zoning for the site. So it's an ordinance. It's done by ordinance, not by resolution, because it ends up being the zoning for the property.
Any members of the public have any questions for Riley on this first part of the presentation?
I do, if you can hear me.
Sure. Is that Bob Silvestri? Yeah.
It is, yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I wanted to say, Riley, great job. It's a great, no, the presentation was great. I mean, it's a very complicated, layered and nuanced thing. And as I hope you all got on the board, got my email correcting my comment in my first letter, where I suggested, and I was just talking as from my experience, and indicating that I said it was unentitled, but in fact, everything, of course, Riley said is true, and he and I talked. Well, the reason I said it that way is exactly what Riley just said, that if someone wants to build the exact same thing, and this one, all of the positives about having these entitlements become liabilities for someone who doesn't want to, has to conform to design review approvals or has to conform to, unit sizes and how the buildings are laid out. And as you guys know, I just want to comment that the difficulty from the developer's side is that we've had somewhere around 36 housing laws passed in the last 3.5 years, and they all affect how housing developers have to look at property and want to look at property. And the market is completely different than it was 13 years ago, certainly for hotels. So I was just speaking for, I can't imagine wanting to build what was there before. It wouldn't be profitable. It wouldn't be the right thing to build the way it's laid out. So that's just my opinion. And I just offer it that it's kind of, it's great the way Riley put it, like, here's all these great benefits, you have entitlements, and the big caveat is, you know, you have to find somebody. So the guy that originally did this with you could conceivably come in and say, I want to build it exactly the same again. And, but I know that relationship wasn't great. So anyway, that was my comment. Thank you, Riley. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other members of the public want to comment or ask any questions at this point? Okay, then back to you, Riley, to continue.
Sure, thank you. So I wanted to touch on the city's general plan update. And the question was asked about the timing, and you know, I've watched these things drag on, some of them for a decade in different cities. It's really a time-consuming process. I will let the board know that the city of Larkspur is in the general plan update process, as they've been for a long time. I spoke to their planning director, and his information to me was that we should be seeing the release of what's called the notice of preparation. That has to do with the environmental impact report for the general plan sometime next week, and that their goal is to complete this by the summer of 2021 to have the general plan process updated. He actually said late spring, early summer, but I'm just going to go with summer because I've seen how these play out. So in regards to timing, that's the party line from the city right now. Middle of next year, they hope to have their new general plan in place. So what is a general plan? A general plan is the constitution of development, and every law underneath it, such as the zoning code, such as a use permit, a preliminary development plan, a precise development plan, must comport with the general plan. We call it vertical consistency. So any laws that are enacted beneath that constitution, of course, must follow said constitution. And what the general plan is supposed to be, although it's kind of morphed over the years, is a statement of goals that the city has, and then the policies by which they will implement those goals. And we're going to see a very specific one in regards to this site, but the general plan contains a number of different elements. That's where the housing element is found, and relevant to your property for now at least, that's where the land use element is found. So again, this is the high level planning document for the city that anything and everything that comes thereafter must comply with. So what it means is that if the general plan is going to have a specific treatment of your site, or even a general discussion about a type of project or a part of town where you want to do something, you want to be sure that that language accommodates and or supports whatever your plan for the property may be. So that's why my concluding recommendation, again, I don't like to bury the lead here on this phase, is that the district be active participants in the general plan process. Try to get a scope or an idea of what you want to do at this site as soon as possible, and become a commenter with the city. I know some of that's already occurred. I did see some letters that were sent from the district to the city a couple of years ago at this point, but it's really important given the weight that the general plan document holds. So here is one of the very relevant policies in the land use element that has to do with the district's property. So there's a section of the land use element that they call vacant and underutilized sites. And LU, which stands for land use policy number 7, has to do with the revitalization of underutilized or marginal commercial, industrial, and residential sites. Well, this property is essentially undeveloped, so it would fit in the underutilized category, particularly given its premier location next to transit, shopping, and other things. So they have proposed General Plan Policy LU 7.1A, and this is actually an action program. And what it says is they want to apply the mixed use 1 land use designation, which I'm about to tell you all about, and which will be a brand new City of Larkspur general plan designation, and actually their first ever mixed use designation of any type. It's being crafted specifically and only for this property. Pretty interesting. And they want to apply that designation to encourage the implementation of a planned development district for 2000 Larkspur Landing Circle. And they want to maintain a mix of uses that encourages economic vitality, meets the city's housing goals, and provides connectivity between the Drakes Cove neighborhood and Larkspur Landing Circle. So those are the goals of their new mixed use 1. Again, it's going to be for your property only. You see the connector road to Drakes Cove makes its way right into the Constitution. So that one is not going anywhere. Whoever develops this site, they really want that connection from Larkspur Landing Road over to Drakes Cove. They do mention economic vitality. It's probably a nod to, some type of tax-based generation, whether it's transit tax, TOT tax from a hotel or retail, which is a tough sell right now. And then, of course, they mentioned the city's housing goals. We are about to enter a new housing cycle where the state is going to push out some pretty big numbers to Marin County, and the planning directors, councils, they're scrambling about how to accommodate that. So that's what the housing goals reference is likely being made to. So there's the action program, and here it is. This is the proposed new land use designation for the property. So if you'll recall, at the outset of this presentation, I showed the map of the different general planned land use designations for the site. I mentioned kind of the lack of flexibility that those provide if you're seeking to do a different project, because it clearly segments up the property into different general plan designations. This proposal is a totally different approach. It is one designation for the entirety of the site that allows a mix of all the previously geographically identified uses, but instead of saying exactly where they have to be or anything like that, it's just saying those uses are allowed here, and here are the rules for how they're allowed. And what this would do if it was implemented would let you determine where on the site is best to locate them and not be limited by the general plan map itself, because it would have the mixed use designation all over the property. So they point out, hey, this is a great site, it's close to transit. So this mixed use will allow high density residential with some commercial or office, both local and regional, and or public facilities. So you see they've captured everything they previously approved, but now they're just saying where you put it is up to you. They are calling for a density up to 21 units per acre for sites with less than 10% slope. Interestingly, there is a minimum density contained in here of 18 units per acre. They then talk about a floor area ratio for the commercial uses, but then they give an exception for hotels. So they call for 0.4 floor area, which is the size of the building in relation to the lot. But they say if you're doing a hotel, you can go up to 1.0. Again, encouraging that high economic producing use. then offices only 0.35. So discouraging the office use in a way. It's still allowed, but then we have affordable housing being encouraged, and maximum densities can be increased for affordable housing. That's the state density bonus law. That's changing rapidly right now. I'm up to speed on it. If people want to hear about it, we can do that in the questions. They want an integrated development pattern. They want you to look out for Drake's Cove, efficient use of land, and of course, bike, ped, connectivity, and minimize the impact of parked cars. They don't like cars at the streetscape being the thing that you see. So what I find interesting about this, as someone who represents developers a lot of the time, and I'm trying to get general plan amendments for my clients, and it's the hardest thing to do. It's legislative in nature. It takes the longest. There's a limit on how many you can do per year. Here you have the city of Larkspur doing it for you. That's the value of this is pretty hard to understate. And I like, besides just the flexibility that it would allow and the skipping of the most major procedural steps should you want to do a plan different than the one that's approved, there's one other thing that has to do with them doing it themselves. Is here we get the CEQA logo again, the California Environmental Quality Act, is they have to do an EIR, an environmental impact report for their general plan. And if a conceptual use, density, size of hotel, or something like that were integrated into the city's EIR for their general plan update, that would be a second significant boon for the district or any developer, because the environmental review would be completed for a project at the site. Now, trying to predict exactly what would come forward if it was something different than what's approved is tough, but it would give an applicant the ability to tier off of, to utilize that base EIR that the city did for its general plan, again, speeding things up, making things less expensive, and helping on procedure. So it's for that reason that my recommendation for the district is to work with the city, participate in that process, think about what your uses are, and try to get them in the mixed use one verbiage, and if you can, get something in the EIR and get it studied, since they got to study everything else anyways. Those are great value adds to the property. I know I was tasked with just tell us what the status of the entitlements are, but this really was an unavoidable part of the research, and to me, perhaps the most promising or interesting from a developer standpoint. So my conclusion is, if you've got somebody that wants to build the project you already have, it's pretty darn close to ready to go. Update the CEQA, maybe, map it, and build it. If you don't, and you find that there perhaps it isn't an interest level for that, or you want to do something different, or you have to acknowledge the change, then try to utilize the city's general plan process as much as you can, because otherwise you're looking at essentially every single possible entitlement again. General plan amendment, precise plan, preliminary plan, design review, new plan sets, all of which are costly. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm of course open for questions, comments, etc.
Thank you. That is fascinating. Board members, questions? Doug?
Not so much a question. I'm wondering if Julia or Steve could take a presentation and show the document I just got back from Dan Schwartz on what Tubbs Lake is. I think it's of some interest.
Okay, do you want to do that right now or just at some point?
At some point.
All right, I'll take other questions from the board at this time. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, I'll take it out to the public. Any comments from members of the public?
Yeah, President Silla.
Oh, sure. Or staff, sorry.
Yeah, I thought maybe I would tear off of a question Director Kelly made earlier, which was, he pointed out that we have invested in a new headquarters, and therefore, the existing entitlements on public facilities aren't necessarily the same as when these entitlements were enacted back in 06, 07. And yet, from a staff standpoint, I remind folks that we have Pump Station 10, which is immediately adjacent to the property, and a major pump station in our system. And we have 3 other major pump stations in our system where we have perimeter area around those pump stations, and it is around 1/4 of an acre. I was wondering, Riley and others on our team, since it's at a different location on the map, it seems to me that we would still need to make some kind of a requested change through the city, even to just establish that 1/4 of an acre in the southwest portion of the property, because it isn't shown as public facilities now in that map and the general plan, et cetera.
Yeah, I don't know the timing or the history of that pump station. It could be considered a legal non-conforming use if it has been in place since before the designations were applied. But yeah, I think no matter what happens at the site, you definitely want it to reflect what's there. And if you're doing amendments or projects, there's no need to leave things as legal non-conforming. You should just identify it, map it. I feel the same way about utilities, et cetera. It's like record the easement, let people know it's there. There's no harm in that. But I haven't looked into the history of the pump station, but you can certainly accommodate it in any plan.
Yeah, very well. Yeah, it's interesting. The pump station itself is off of the property. It's separate. But there's a.
Well, that's why it's not shown in any of the plans. All of these plans only encapsulated the property.
Right, and so the parcel, the perimeter area that we would request, which is standard with all of our pump stations, would actually go into the parcel in a way that's not represented in these, existing entitlements. It would be not real large, but it would be a change.
Well, that's the beauty of you being the owner of the parcel, that you would need the perimeter into, is you can make that a condition of any sale, development agreement, lease, whichever mechanism you guys land on. I should probably elaborate and clarify that I'm not the transactional attorney, and I'm not giving that advice. I'm solely the land use attorney.
Yeah, it just seems to me that I just point that out, that, as far as what the future of this parcel looks like, the district's interests are no longer necessarily headquarters, but there is a perimeter pump station area interest. And so that draft mixed land use description, which includes public facilities, I consider that a good thing to make sure that it stays in the final, if that's where this eventually goes for this property, because there is a staff level need for area for public facilities still on the parcel.
Perfect kind of thing that would go in a general plan comment, right? So that's why the participation and collaboration with the city becomes critical as the document evolves.
So was that a mistake? And I mean, did we in effect sell, or at one point sell and then get back through a lawsuit, as I understand the history? But Michael Cooper can help us with that. We sold something near a pump station that we actually should have not sold, or that we need?
No, we have all the entitlements we need for the actual pump station, But currently, we have a perimeter area around that pump station that is part of the existing parcel that we are using for yard purposes. And in a future use of the parcel, since there would not be a headquarters and corporation yard associated with that, the new future, whatever that is, in the district's interest to have a perimeter area around that existing major pump station, which would encroach on this existing parcel on the order of 1/4 acre to 1/2 acre.
Got it. Okay. Okay. That makes sense. Yes, Mr. Hooper.
Yes, thank you, Mary, members of the board. Michael Hooper, Campus Properties, with the former developer of the property until the unfortunate hazmat condition arose. First of all, Riley, great job.
Thanks, Michael.
It took me 8 years to get through that little up, and it was always a challenge to boil it down into a way that people could easily understand, and I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head. Just to deal with the pump station first, the approved plan does include an area for the continued operation of the pump station in the existing approvals. If my memory serves me well, and it's now 12 years or more, probably more, we were buying the entire area and we were leasing back to the district, the pump station, but I might be wrong because it's been an awful long time. It's certainly easy to check. The only comment I've really got, frankly, is the reference to the updated general plan. I'm sure Riley will go away and think about this and check it. I think you'll find that the existing approvals fit precisely within the wording of mixed use 1. And I know that because I was part of the discussion to ensure that the new general plan update didn't change anything. And remember, the city have always been very interested in maintaining the approvals. They have to have the number of units available for their housing element. Back in 2014 or 15, I guess, they initiated a smart station area update, and there was some discussion at that time as to what the general plan land use designation would be. Of course, that smart station update never went anywhere. It never got approved. The main reason for which was the community really didn't want any more intensity of development. And in fact, it never even got to a hearing. So I think it was after that, again, I might be wrong, it's been a long time, that the wording of the mixed use 1 land use designation was finally, settled upon. But it does, it does include.
Test, anyone there?
Yeah, it looks like there's some freezing going on. Okay, now it looks like everybody's moving again.
All right. Yes, I hear you.
Go on, Michael. You were saying the former designation falls within the mixed use 1?
Correct. It's basically tailored around the project because it was and still is, as we know, an approved project. And I'm glad, by the way, Riley came to the conclusion that he did. That's the exact same conclusion that our attorney, the Koblenz law firm, came to, and the exact same conclusion that the city of Larkspur came to.
Yeah. I mean, I think Riley said the distinction was instead of four designations on the property, there's 1, but the 1 now encompasses the 4 different types that were there before. So yeah, it makes it pretty clear to me that they wanted to, if we could sell it with these plans, they would be okay with that.
Correct. They wanted to preserve the opportunity to build what was there. And as we found out in the Smart Station Update plan or specific plan, the community didn't want an increase in intensity. So they were right to word it the way they worded it. Preserve all opportunities.
Makes sense.
They can go back, or somebody could go back and change it all, but it's not going to be me. It took 8 years of my life. Good luck to them.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the public or the board? Yes, Pam.
Riley, are you not going to talk about the new affordable housing law that's come out of Sacramento? Are you not going to, talk about our position with that? Because it is supplemental land.
I'm sorry, which law are you referencing?
The new affordable housing law, when you have public land that's supplemental, I believe you need to offer it to schools or affordable housing first.
Yeah, so that's the Surplus Land Act that Steve Moore mentioned at the outset of the meeting would not be discussed this evening. Is also, so my answer would be no. I'm not going to be addressing that.
You're going to talk about it in the future?
Ms. Clark will be addressing that. You want to jump in?
We will, yes. Yeah, I believe, and Steve, you can correct me, but I think that is the a potential topic for a future informational meeting of the board.
Okay, but Riley won't be part of it. We won't use a land use attorney then? Is that what you're saying?
That was not within the scope that was authorized by the board for me. So no, I have not looked at the Surplus Land Act. My understanding is that Andrea has expertise in that area and will be providing that presentation to the board.
Yeah, he was just looking into our Larkspur entitlements and where we stand with that. But how we go forward, I think, is both Andrea and Century Urban's role to advise us on.
Right.
Great.
Mary, Doug Kelly.
Yes,
Doug Kelly. Can I ask to have Julia put that Tubbs Lake thing up on the screen so we can all know what it is?
Oh, sure. Is it actually a lake?
Dan Schwartz returned my email and he sent me a link to a document and I just cut and paste the page, but I believe General Manager Steve Moore is copied on that. He can forward that to the board.
Will do.
Okay. So are we not trying to put it up on a screen? No. Okay.
I do want to put it up on the screen.
Oh,
Okay, so I'll share my screen.
thank you, Julia.
I've been to Tubbs Lake. I didn't know it was called that.
Okay, where do you think it is? Where do you think it is?
It's up on the hill by, you could walk over to CMSA from there, right?
It doesn't exist, but it's.
There is a lake. It's calling it a lake is generous.
Okay.
But there is a facility there, and it's upstream of our of the swale that goes on the eastern side of this Larkspur Landing property.
It's
right above us.
It's
upstream.
On page 31 of 168, in Exhibit B, it is shown on the upper right-hand corner. I saw it on the map.
Yeah, it's in
Also, Miwok Park. I was thinking Miwok Park. Is that out in Miwok Village? Like, what does this have to do with it? But
it is Miwok Park, and there's a trail that is the circumference of this little lake, and it's a nice place. And the Drake's Cove community, it's their local park, and Yeah, it's a pleasant little area.
Yeah. And
Well,
oh yes, go ahead, Michael.
it mentions it. Doug, it's currently mostly intrepid hikers will sometimes visit, but its primarily used as transients, creating a liability for the city. So it seems like they're looking at developing this into more of a lake than it is right now in a property. That's what I'm getting the impression of. All right, but I'll let it at that. Thanks.
Michael, go ahead. Cooper.
So I can probably give you a little bit of background on this. And if you haven't been up to Tub Lake, Miwok Park, excuse me, Tub Lake is a small piece of Miwok Park. You should do so because it's one of the best views of Mount Tam in all of Marin. There's a particular spot on the far side of the lake that when you view the mountain with the trees on either side, it is truly spectacular. It's been pretty much off limits. City haven't encouraged people to go up there in all the years that I've lived here, simply because they don't, or they suspect that it might be a lover's lane or a place to get up to some bad stuff kind of thing. So they haven't been encouraging it. It is the remnant of the Remillard brickmaking facility. That's where they stored their water. The dam is over 100 years old, hence the question about the viability of the dam. And it wasn't, we got over that. It became a question of, well, who's going to maintain it? And that was the nexus issue. If there was any nexus, then we would contribute to it. But it's above the property and really ought not to be, contributing to it. So Miwok is a city official park, and the lake used to have a house, built over a portion of it. That was torn down. It's been drained a couple of times. And after it's been drained, it is spectacular. So we decided back then to integrate it into the project, which the city loved, of course, and provide access to Miwok Park, including Tub Lake. So that's the background to it.
Where do you park to go to Miwok Park?
That's a very good question. You don't.
Okay.
Well, actually, I've done it, and it's not so off the beaten track anymore because
It's not.
the Drake's Cove Way, those houses have been built now in the last 5 years, and so there's right adjacent to a place, and there's a place where 2 cars can park, and you can go on this pleasant little walk around the lake. And there's even a little bridge where the dam is, and you can park down the connector road too. So there's plenty of parking, and it's like a local park for this residential area.
That's what it's become. The city's intent was that one wouldn't park on the street at that gate, as it were, but instead, when they do a master plan for the park, which I don't believe they've done, then there would be a couple of parking spaces off there on the right. It wasn't particularly for Drake's Cove or Drake's Landing, whatever they call it, or for our project. It's a citywide public park.
Yeah, definitely. It's just used by the locals.
You said Drake's Way.
It's used by locals.
Steve, you said Drake's Way, so you'd go up, it says EAH, Drake's Way, so that's affordable housing up there, is that right?
Not that one. Yeah, that one is tricky because actually as part of the conditions, if you read into the details, they want that connecting path from Lincoln's Village, but it's called Drake's Cove Way, I believe, and when you get there, it's actually directly from East Sir Francis Drake Boulevard.
Right, yeah, I know that.
East of the melting pot and, the fondue restaurant. And
Right,
it's
the bigger homes.
It's a hazardous little T intersection. There's sort of a blind spot. People come through there like it's the freeway. And the city of Larkspur wants this connector road through our property so that this neighborhood can access Sir Francis Drake Road without an intersection that doesn't have a light.
Yeah.
So that's the way you get up there. It's kind of circuitous. And so therefore, yeah, not many people know about it, but it is a public park.
Interesting.
Correct. With the connector road, it was a fundamental thing that we had to figure out. Tom Monahan was doing the Drake's Cove project at the time. We eventually came along with an alignment that worked for everybody as best we could. But it's not just to get to Miwok, it's to get Drake's Cove folks to Larkspur Landing without touching Drake.
Yeah.
It's an obvious thing. It's just a fundamental circulation issue.
Yeah, next time you come from the Richmond Bridge down Sir Francis Drake, just keep your eye out on the right and toward 101, toward our property. There's a T intersection there for this neighborhood, and you'll think, yeah, that'd be kind of hard to make a left out of there.
Oh yeah, no, I know exactly where it is. Yeah, that'll be interesting to go up there. Yeah, yes, Brian, would you like to say something?
Sure, I would. Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, I just want to acknowledge Riley's presentation. I think he unpacked 8 years of work by campus, who's obviously on the line with us this evening, and really kind of helped us understand where we're headed. I mean, these are all meant to be educational workshops for the board, the public, such that we're all making the best informed decision for the ratepayer. And I think this was a critical element in doing that. So I just want to acknowledge Riley's good work. I also think, we've talked about the SLA, the Surplus Lands Act, and that will be the next, I think, one of the upcoming conversations. And this is all, a matriculation or education process, and we need to go slow in order to really go fast. And so I think tonight was a really, really helpful, piece of the unpacking the entitlements. I think the biggest nugget that we found through Riley's efforts was the General Plan 2040 update. That is a key piece, potential piece of this site in the future. So I'll pause there, but I just wanted to say a few words.
Thank you. Yes, Pam. You're on mute, Pam.
Sorry. I have a request for all our public meetings for the future. Can we give the public a 72-hour notice? Because a 24-hour notice, I know people that couldn't attend, and it's just too hard to get it out there. And I think it's so vital to be very open and transparent about it. So for the next round or whatever, if we could get a 72-hour notice. Thank you.
Yeah, we did a 48-hour notice this time.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on this very educational presentation, including a little thing we didn't know about?
Yeah, thanks to Brian of our Century Urban team, also Leo Ma, who's joined us. Appreciate your wrap-up comments. It was very helpful. And I also just want to emphasize that our goal with these informational presentations, which live on our website as a reference for folks as we move through this, to look at what are the transactional structures that the board can consider using, what are the local government land use entitlements and the laws, the ordinances that govern this property. And next, we're going to talk more about the state level requirements, with the Surplus Lands Act and other laws we must comply with going forward. And the goal here is for us to lay out the rules of the road as we look ahead to the disposition of surplus property at 2000 Larkspur Landing Circle. And so I think that's the next logical informational presentation. We've touched on it a bit. And then subsequent to that, we'll have the opportunity to look a little further into what the recommended course of action might be. And along the way, we certainly encourage strongly the input of our ratepayers and the interested public as we move through this. So thanks, Bryant. Thanks very much, Riley, for your concise and clear memo. and the research and the recommendations to engage with the city of Larkspur, which at the staff level we're enthusiastic about pursuing.
Yes, Michael Borstein.
Hi, Riley. I just want to say thank you very much. I am certainly not a land use attorney, and you took what I think is a very complex subject and was able to distill it into something that I think is meaningful, not just to me, but I hope the rest of the board also. So I'm glad we had this opportunity this afternoon, and I do hope that the public becomes aware of what we're trying to do and becomes more engaged in the future. And Steve Moore, in his bulletin that he put out the other day, said the same thing. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to the board. I kind of a nerd about this stuff, so I thought it was interesting to look into it. And if anybody ever wants to give me a ring or ask questions, you know, I'm advancing development projects all throughout this county at any given time. I'd be happy to just chat as you guys make your way through this about the entitlement side of things.
I really appreciate you. I'm sorry I put you on the spot, but you did an excellent condensation of explaining the general plan. So I wanted to give you kudos for that. It was really good. I was a planning commissioner for almost 10 years, and the public doesn't quite understand, but that was a great putting it, kind of compacted it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Julia.
Yes, in the chat, Ms. Liesel Blash commented, thank you, that's very interesting. When are you likely to be talking about the Surplus Lands Act and the implications for this property? Do we have a proposed timeline or anything for Liesel?
Good question, Liesel.
Yes, at the pleasure of the board, of course. We were envisioning that between the next two board meetings might be a good time to take this up. Just continuing the current pattern of not necessarily scheduling this during a regular board meeting, but doing it in an off week. And so if we were to do something like that, we'd be looking at after December 16th, before the board meeting in January. That would be one option, as you know, maybe the first week back from New Year's or the week after the next board meeting, regularly scheduled. So that I just wanted to throw those ideas out there. Nothing is set in stone, but we'll check everyone's schedule, as we want to keep a regular cadence to these informational meetings.
Thank you. That's great. Thanks, Julia, for pointing that out about the chat. I didn't see it. Anything else? All right. Seeing nothing, we're adjourned. Thank you all very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.